بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Allah says in the Quran وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. So today we look at, in a bit more detail, we look at this backbiting and slander. This is quite a detailed discussion, mashallah. Backbiting or ghiba, how do you define it? So we know whether it comes under the definition or not, is to mention a fault of your brother. To mention a fault of your brother is backbiting. Not just that much, there's more to the description. Sometimes it's correct to mention the fault of your brother. So it is to mention the fault of your brother whom you specify and who is known to the one being addressed. If you mention a fault in general, that people have this fault or there is a fault and nobody knows who you're talking about, that's okay. However, if it's about somebody specific, look, he's got this fault, then it's not finished yet. You'll have to listen to the whole thing. Number two, you don't mention anything, you impersonate his fault. If the person has a limp, you walk with a limp. If the person has some other issue, you impersonate it. You make a physical remark about it in a derogatory way, essentially. Or to make the fault understood by your hand or body gestures. So either way, you represent somebody's fault to somebody else, whether physically, verbally, or otherwise. Sometimes this could be correct. What he's saying here is if any of these forms are done in a manner of insult and hatred. So if I come to you and I see a fault in you and I say to you nicely that, look, I've seen this, it'd be nice if you can correct this, in a general view of goodwill, that's not ghiba. Ghiba is if I take that fault, I don't say anything to that person, I come and tell somebody else in a way to insult him or show hatred for him. If I come to you and say, I know you've got connection with him, maybe you can speak to him, and I say this with goodwill, that's fine as well, because that's not done to insult, that's done to reform. Sometimes people make it out to be reform, but it's actually an insult. They make it seem like, oh, we're trying to be good, but you really want to just drive the point home. So that's the full definition, right? This is definitively unlawful. It's haram qat'i, right? It's haram qat'i. So just as ghiba can be done by speech or gestures, so too it can also be done by writing. So if you write something about somebody, it's the same thing. Or even in one's heart. The Prophet ﷺ said, do you know what backbiting is? They said, Allah and His Messenger know best. To which he replied, mentioning your brother in a way that he dislikes. Mentioning your brother in a way that he dislikes. In fact, if your brother has told you, meaning anybody has told you something even positive, that he's just got a very good job, or he is interested and he's fixed up with a certain, and you go and tell that to somebody else, that could end up being backbiting, because he doesn't want anybody to know. So one has to be very, very careful what you pass on to others, because he dislikes it. It's not a fault, is it? It's a positive aspect. But you mentioning something of your brother which he dislikes that his praise be mentioned for no reason. Someone asked, what about if it is true what you say about him? A lot of people think it's true what he says, that's why I'm saying it. The Prophet ﷺ said, if it is true, then that is backbiting. Because if it was untrue, then you've done slander instead, which is buhtan, where you invent something. That's actually worse. It is also a form of backbiting to say, someone who came by today, someone we saw today. I'm not going to mention his name, but we saw him today. It's the same thing, right? You're not mentioning the name, but you're just making it, you're just trying to hide behind something, but it's obvious. There's a brother who came today. I'm not going to mention his name. I'm sure you'll understand who I'm talking about. whatever you say, if the one being addressed understands the particular person, then that is backbiting as well. Because what is cautioned against is making him understand not the way one understands. As long as you understand who we're talking about, that's backbiting. If, however, the one addressed does not understand who in particular is meant, then it is allowed, because then you're doing it to strike a lesson, then it's fine. If you don't know who I'm speaking about, and I'm saying it just to give a lesson, then that would be fine. Backbiting can sometimes actually be kufr. How is backbiting kufr? By one denying the hukm, as it is something that is known through the Quran and is necessarily known of the religion that backbiting is haram, and somebody says, if somebody is told, brother, this is backbiting, it's haram, to which he responds, that is not backbiting, since it is true. It is only backbiting if it is true, because if it's not true what you're saying, it's slander. So don't ever resist like that, because that could be kufr, because you might be denying backbiting, which is وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. You might be denying a verse of the Quran. But don't go around putting... what we have to understand about takfir, because nowadays in the last 50 to 100 years, takfir has become very easy. Ulama always, when they saw somebody doing a kufri action, they would say, this is a kufri action. They wouldn't necessarily render the person kafir, because it doesn't make a difference whether we render the person kafir or not. It's up to Allah. However, what he said is kufr. Does it make him a kafir? We'll leave that to Allah. Unless you're an Islamic court and you need to judge that. We leave that to Allah, but it is definitely a kufri words or kufri action that he's doing. Do you know that backbiting is permissible sometimes? Did anybody know that backbiting is sometimes permissible? Don't get excited. Yeah, tell me the permissible ones so I can do that one. You'll see that it's actually a very common sense where backbiting is actually permissible. I'll tell you why. I've got a neighbor, and he started this new job, and one of the brothers there was bothering him. This guy's very soft, acts very soft and polite. So the other person is probably taking advantage of him and saying bad things to him. So what my neighbor tried to do is to talk to a third brother who he thought was a dignified individual. Can you please speak to him? Because if I do it, I might get angry and lose my cool, and it might become worse. So can you please speak to him? Now, this brother, this new brother, dry practicing. He said, brother, we shouldn't speaking about these things. It's fasting time. We're going to mess up our fast if you speak about these things. And the guy is going to him for help, man. I've got problems. Can you please speak to him for me? And he's telling him, brother, we shouldn't speak about this. It might mess up our fasting. So what kind of dry understanding is that? That means you can't complain to anyone. You can't ask anybody for help, because it becomes backbiting. This is what happens when we don't understand the full story properly. So that's why there are situations when backbiting is permissible. Backbiting is permissible if it is done for a legally valid aim that cannot be attained except by backbiting. So look at it very carefully and don't use this to justify. Number one, to redress a wrong, to correct a wrong. You have to bring it up. If you complain about somebody to the court or something, you're backbiting essentially. But that's permissible backbiting because you're trying to sort it out. It is permissible for one who is being oppressed to seek help from the government, the judge, or others in authority, or the imam, or anybody who has the ability to redress the wrong. Go and tell his father, his brother, his friend. So one, for example, will say, so-and-so has oppressed me by doing such and such. That's actually technically backbiting, because you're mentioning something about your brother which he dislikes, but it's a permissible reason for doing so. There's no other way to sort it out. Can you please sort him out? Why? What has he done? I can't tell you that. It's backbiting. That's not going to be very useful, is it? So you can mention, but you can only mention only that much. You can't mention more than that. Only the amount that is necessary. Number two, seeking aid in stopping a wrong or correcting a sinful person. So one can say, for example, to the one he hopes that can change the situation, so and so does such and such, please stop him. his aim should be to take the means to stop the wrongdoing. If his intention is other than that, just to humiliate the other person or to bring it up or whatever, then that is unlawful as well. So you have to be very careful what your intention is for these permissible ones. Number 3, if you want to seek a legal verdict, a fatwa, and you want to know whether you're right or wrong, there's a case that you have between two people, between yourself and the other person. So you go to a scholar and you say, so-and-so has done this to me. I think he has oppressed me by doing such and such. Is that permissible for him to do? Who's right here? But again, you can only divulge just enough information for the scholar to understand. You can't say the whole life story if it's not necessary. And how can I end this situation? What is the fatwa? That would be permissible as well. Number 4, you can do backbiting to warn somebody of somebody's evil. If there's somebody going around deceiving people, selling fake goods, or taking loans and a bad investment just to get money, then you can go and warn people. That would be backbiting, isn't it? Be careful. That's backbiting technically. But it's permissible because you're doing it to warn others. So ulama, when it comes to hadith criticism, hadith narrators, not everybody was the perfect narrator of the hadith. So they would criticize hadith narrators to say, be careful of this guy, he makes mistakes. Or he's been known to make up a few hadith. That's backbiting. But it was necessary backbiting so that people wouldn't take the wrong hadith. Number 2, seeking advice for marriage. You want to seek advice for something like, I'm interested in so-and-so's daughter or son or whatever. Can you tell me? Now if you're asked about this, you can tell only as much as is relevant to the marital relationship. Not the whole story, right? If there's more to it. Only enough that's going to give them information. If you are looking for a business partner, you want to leave something for safekeeping with somebody, you can ask them. General financial transaction with somebody. Being one's neighbor. Can you please tell me about, I'm thinking of buying this house. Brother so-and-so lives next door and this. Can you tell me what you think about them? How are they as neighbors? And then the person can mention a few relevant things. These would be permissible places. It is obligatory on the one whose counsel is sought to not hide the state of the one asked about. Rather, he must make mention of the person's vices with the intention of offering sincere counsel. However, if you think you're going to get in trouble by doing this because the word is going to get around, then you can just say, look, I don't want to get involved in this. You could do that if you want to. I think that would be enough to tell a person there's a problem. Like, I don't want to get involved. I mean, why would you? Because there's some issue, right? If there was no issue, why wouldn't you want to get involved? If one sees a student of sacred knowledge studying under a person of reprehensible innovation or an open sinner, it's a scholar who is not a real scholar or something, then he must give him sincere counsel and explain the state of the teacher. The condition is that he intends sincere counsel. Many commit errors in this, as what moves them rather is envy. They shouldn't be envy that, like, don't study with him because I'm jealous of him. Yet Satan makes it seem otherwise, such that he thinks it's sincere counsel. So let one be astute about this. If one has a position, the duties of which he is not carrying out properly due to being irresponsible or an open sinner, neglectful or the like, in such a case it is mandatory to mention this to the supervisor, who can then admonish the person, remove the person and find someone more capable. For example, if you're the manager and you have to look after certain things and there's somebody who's not pulling his weight, who's not doing his job, then of course you're going to have to mention, look, he doesn't do his job properly, sleep much, or he comes late, or something like this. If one sees somebody paying for a purchase with counterfeit money, then you will mention. I mean, you understand the points now. You understand. There's a few other points, inshallah, we'll do them tomorrow. But now you understand that the Sharia is not, it's very nuanced, it's very particular in the way they say things. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from backbiting.